Hello folks, this is Leah Wanasaki from MasterLabSystems. Okay, today we'll be looking at JavaSpringBoot plus React, building a real payment system with Stripe. Okay. So let's look at what we are building today. Okay, so we'll be looking at SpringBoot REST API, Stripe Payment Internet API, React Frontend with Stripe checkout elements, user enter the custom amount, Frontend plus Backend integration, verification and dashboard monitoring. Okay. Why build a payment API? Okay, let's look at why would you build a payment API, of course. So first of all, it enables online transaction, e-commerce, SaaS subscriptions, and provides secure payments without storing card details. Stripe handles the PCI compliance, integrates easily with React, mobile, and backend systems, and also lastly, real world, and it is an in-demand skill for fintech. Let's look at what is Stripe. So Stripe is a payment processing platform that provides card payments such as Visa, MasterCard, Amex, etc. Digital wallets such as Apple Pay, Google Pay, etc. Subscriptions and invoicing, fraud detection such as Radar, developer friendly for REST APIs. Let's look at the system architecture for this demo. So a React, which is the mobile or the client side, so would request for a payment using the HTTP, which goes to SpringBoot payment API, which will be then redirected to a Stripe API via webhooks and stored that transaction to database or Postgres or any DB for that matter, depending on your choice, of course. Let's look at the tech stack we require for this demo. Okay, so in terms of the layer, we require the backend API. For technology, we'll be using SpringBoot 3 plus Java 17. Authentication and billing, we require Stripe payment intent. DB, we can use H2, which is the in-memory database for development, or Postgres for production system. Tools, Postman and Stripe CLI. And also we require Node.js as well, which I didn't provide it here, but for front end as well. And for lastly, for deployment, which is something that we can also look at in the next coming tutorial for by using Docker to AWS. Okay, so let's look at the prerequisite we will require before starting this end-to-end development. So we require Java 17, Maven, Stripe, Java SDK, Postman, or any HTTP client for that matter that you can use to test either using your CLI or a CAL request. Stripe CLI, IDE, you can use IntelliJ and VS Code depending on your choice, of course. And lastly, Node.js for building the front end or React UI. Okay, so first step, we need to create a Stripe account. So creating a Stripe account that will allow us to obtain the publishable key and the secret key that will store in our application.yaml file or application.properties for backend. So you visit stripe.com and then you go to create a developer account, you open developers, you create API keys, you copy those, of which I will also be showing them as well. Okay. So, setting SpringBoot application, you create a SpringBoot payment service project, you add your necessary dependencies, and you configure your environment variables. Okay? And you create a payment intent, which is the core API layer. So, as well, I'll also be showing that as well. Okay. So, let's look at the handling payment confirmation now using the front end. So, front end will confirm payment using Stripe.js or mobile SDK, depending on your native, and the backend will store the transaction and processes them accordingly. Okay, so as well, this one I can skip it. Okay, I've already covered this. So okay, I guess we can start creating our demo account on Stripe. Okay, so and also creating a project as well that will export it to our IDE. And lastly, create a front-end service. Okay, so let's first create a Stripe account. So again, if you go to Stripe, To create this, you go to stripe.com, create an account, of course. So this is the page you should be learning to on Stripe. Okay, I don't really have to show you how you can create an account, but this is where you can start to create an account. So once you've created an account, you should be coming to this page to obtain the keys. You will be redirected to this page, so which is this Stripe page to create the API keys, which is something that you can also see on your API on your URL. Okay, so what we need here, so let's say we are creating a new API key. So once, of course, you have created your account, you will be then begin to create your API key. So by default, Stripe will give you the standard keys that you can use. Of course, I'll rotate mine, so which you can also use this one. But of course, if you want to create your specific keys, so you just simply come here and then you create a restricted key. So a restricted key would mean it's a key that does not have all the functionalities, or which is it only allows you to access the only features, certain features you want. So which is something that you would to come in here, building your own integration, of course, to continue. And then you give it your application name, maybe whatever, or test key. You give it your key name, and then you select the which is the core resources that you require. So which is again the functionalities that you would need. In this case, we need the payment intent. So here you can either use read and write. So once you add all of those that you require, again, I wouldn't really recommend using this way, because sometimes you might not get the correct permissions. So once you get all of those that you require, those core functionalities that you require, you simply then click on the create, which will eventually create your keys. Okay, but of course, I like to use the recommended way instead of creating the restricted keys. So I will cancel this for now. Okay, so these were my restricted keys that I've created, of which if I wanted to, I can simply use them, or rather just copy the default ones that come prior or when creating your account. So which is simply these ones that contains the full functionalities. As you can see, this one unlocks the full API access basically. So once you can get those, you can store them safely, and then we start now to begin to create the backend service, which is again, if you come in here, I will be using SpringBoot in this case. So if you come to Spring Initializer, so to create a backend application that will be processing this request. Okay, so from here, using Spring Initializer allows you or gives you the ability to automate or to generate a skeleton application, a skeleton Java application. So what we require here, a language, we'll keep it to Java, and the build tool will leave to Maven. Okay, a version, it's fine, you can use 3.5.8. I don't have explicit to that one. So for your project metadata, in my case, I like to use MasterLab, Stripe. Okay, come with MasterLab. Okay, and then activate the name. I can give it Stripe Payment API. Okay, depending on whatever name you want to give your application. So in this case, I can give it Stripe Payment API, or a Stripe catalog, payment catalog, and then any name for that matter that you want to. So you do that here. Okay, for packaging, it's fine, you can leave it to your configuration. So this would mean if you're using properties file or YAML, of course, depending on the case. But for now, we can leave it to YAML, maybe change it on the project side, or rather one time generate properties. Okay, so again, version with 17, it's fine, we'll leave it to 17. Okay, so we can confirm again. So let's add basic dependencies. Of course, we are building a web-based application, you require web and H, and you require dev tools. You can add dev tools, and you require homework for boilerplate reducement. Get that, and yeah, I think this should be sufficient, but of course we can verify again if we need to add more. I know we'll need the stripe as well, but I can provide that one because sometimes it doesn't come directly from Spring. So let's see if we can get it. Stripe, okay, again we can manually add that one, okay, but of course I'll be showing you as well. So once you add all your stuff in, you can simply click generate. So of course we have generated it, so now we can import it to my IDE or to your IDE. So in this case I will be using IntelliJ. So now I will be showing you an exported project. So okay, so this is now my exported project. So as you can see, that's my project name that I've exported, or that I decided to give it a name. So it should be like this even on your end when you've exported it. So you export it, you open it in your IDE. So once you can open it in your IDE, so now we should begin to edit. It should be something like this, an empty repo with just a main class. Okay, so yes, once it's like this, it means now we can begin to add our code. Okay, so again, first thing we need, we can just verify the dependencies. So again, the ones we generated was web, yes, you need to have that one in. Lombok, you can even copy from here or write it from a screen if you can see it properly, or if you didn't generate it from the Spring initializer. But at the same time, I will be sharing this code to my GitHub account. So okay, we got a lombok in here for reducing boilerplate, and we have the dev tools. Okay, the H2DB, we might need it, we might not, but of course depending if we need to be extending this project. But of course for now you can add it. And this is the dependency I was referring to, which is the stripe dependency. So this one, it's mandatory, you require this one. Okay, so again, since we didn't find it on Spring initializer directly from Spring, but of course you can add it. So which is what we need for Stripe SDK. And lastly, you can add as well the SpringBoot starter validator. Again, you can add this one in. So once we have all of these in place, then you should be able, then now from here we'll go to the resources, then we can add our application config. So again, we just need to create our application.properties file. So if we do this, say application.properties, okay. So we also add that in here as well, which is the application.properties. Okay, then we'll start to begin to add some configuration. So let's start as well, begin to add our packages. So we need, first package should be the config. Okay, we've created the config. Now let's add the controller. Okay, we add the DTO, we add the DTO, and we add the service. That was restoring our service logic. Okay, folks, require those. So once we have all of this in place, let's ensure we add our necessary application configuration here. Okay, so I have prepared some snippets already, which I'm just gonna be copying from. Okay, so first thing we need, we start with this one, which is the properties file. Okay, so we paste that in here. So what we have here, we have the application name, which is again defines our application name. We have the port name, which defines where application is accessible from, and again these are the Stripe key and the public key that we copied from our Stripe dashboard. Again, I will show you last time. So as I said, I will be using these ones directly that are provided by default, but immediately after this demo I will be deleting those or rotating them, so you can generate yours. Okay, so we add them, and lastly this is our front-end application where it will be running from. So I will add that in as well, so we don't do any technical debt, something that will require it later on. So it's better to just right away add it in place. So once we have that in here, so the configuration file is ready now, so we can start to add our configuration files. So our files here. Okay, so first file we have, of course I will start from the config. As I said, I have prepared some snippets that I would like to be copying from. So the config, I'm just gonna copy it all. Okay, so we'll create a new Java file, give it Stripe config, give it a name. Okay, and then we'll paste it in here. So of course I'll be explaining this code as well. So if I do this just to fix the import. Okay, so this is what we should be having currently. Okay, so what we have here, so this is our configuration file that will be configure our environment variables such as the Stripe API key, and also to configure our front-end calls, because since this application or this API will be consumed from the front end, so we require to add the calls, which is the cross-origin request server that will be using this API. So because if we don't, Spring will decline all the requests, so we'll be blocking all of those requests, which is something we don't want as well. So what we have here, we first define of course our Stripe config, and we point out a query, or we call the add value, which comes from this application secret, which this application properties file, which is this configuration file. So it comes in and calls the public key, so which is something that you are seeing here, which is the secret key. So it comes in and call the secret key, not the public key, because the public key will be what being consumed from the front end. So it comes in and call the secret key, so which it finds it, and it creates a secret, and it creates an API key which assigns that to the secret key. Okay, so now that is only what we require for Spring to be able to consume that secret key, or that Stripe secret key, so it can be able to authenticate to the Stripe dashboard. Okay, so now let's add the global calls. Again, normally for each route you'd specify if you need it to be accessible or which method you can access that. So again, using the global configurations, we are also reducing that ability to, or that whole layer of you having to configure each application route or each controller of which services will be accessing it, or which origins will be accessing it, and methods for that. So again, using this global configuration, this global cause configuration, it also helps us in reducing that as well. Okay, so what we have here, we are having a smaller function that add the cause mapping. It requires the cause registry and creates an instance of a registry, which allows us and give us some functions to add mappings. We add the origins, so we add the allowed methods, the allowed headers, allowed credentials, and maximum age. Okay, so once we add all of this in place, then we should be done as well to the Stripe config. Okay, so we have that in. Okay, so now we are done with the config as well, we can begin with the controller. Again, as I said, I got some snippets in place, so I'll be copying those snippets in. Okay, so what we need now, okay, I'm just gonna create this file first. So it's created a payment controller, and then of course I'll be taking you through it as well. So we create a payment controller, and we come in, copy our snippet. Okay, so we come in here. Of course I'll be explaining this too. So currently it's gonna be having some errors because of we haven't created the rest of the other files, but that's not a problem. Perhaps we should first create all of those, then once we create them, then we begin to explain the code. So let's add now the details, which is to create a payment request. Okay, so the DTO, which is the first DTO, create a payment request, and we copy that DTO in, copy and paste. Okay, so this is what we require, and then now we'll be creating a new DTO again, which is as well needed, which is the payment intent. Okay, so let's create the second DTO. Okay, come in into DTO, Java class, edit. Okay, come in and copy as is. Once we paste in as well. Okay, so it means now errors from the payment controller might be reduced as well. Okay, maybe let's just add the service as well, so we can go through the whole code when it is connected. Okay, so now we'll create a service as well. Okay, so let's go in and get the service layer. Okay, payment service. So we come into, we create a payment service. So let's copy that snippet in, and we paste it. Let's just fix out the minor errors. Okay, now let's look at the full flow, folks, before testing this. Okay, so again, we'll start from the first layer, which is from the config. Okay, so config, as I said, on the config file, what we have the configuration for Stripe and for course. So Stripe is just to allow us to authenticate to the Stripe dashboard by using a secret key called an API key. Okay, and then we add the cause, which is the cross origins, so the front-end service can be able to initiate a request to the backend. That's all on the Stripe config. And then moving on, we go to the controller layer, or maybe let's just start from the DTO layer. So we have what on the DTO layer? We have the create payment request that will be using to create our payment request. Okay, so we have first, of course, private long amount, the amount that we are using to be creating the payment, and the currency, of course, and the description. So that's the all stuff we need again for the payment request. So once we have all of that, that's all needed. Okay, and again we have the payment intent response. So once in the payment intent response, we just need to string ID, a client secret, amount, and a currency, and a status. So if once we have all of that, again we are good. So lastly, now we have a controller. So okay, maybe before going to the controller, let's look at the service. Okay, so we have now, which is the service layer. So the service layer just creates a payment intent. It allows us to create a payment intent and set some payment intent parameters. That's all it does. And lastly, create a payment intent by assigning those parameters we requested, which is the amount, the currency description, and we set it enabled, and then we assign those parameters to the create intent payment function. Okay, so that's all also we need on the service. Once we have the service, now we can go to the controller. Okay, so again, this is a REST controller that will be used from the front end, so it's important that we annotate it with a REST controller, and we provide the request mapping where the routes needs to be going to API payments. Okay, so now what we first do here, we create a payment instance, and then we create here again argumented constructor, which we can call it, in this case, a constructor injection. So we can add here at auto wired, since this is Spring. So sometimes this is important to add it, so we don't inject the dependency directly on the field, you know. So or rather we do a constructor injection. So once we have that in here, we then now create the first route, which is to create the payment. So what this does, of course, it uses a post, because of it gets the request and forwards it to the Stripe SDK. From the Stripe SDK, gets processed. So that's what we have. We use the payment intent response. We create an instance of that, and then we assign the intent IDs, which is already what we have from our payment intent response. Okay, and then we create a response entity, we assign a response, and then we build it from there. Okay, that's all folks who are required for the backend, I believe. So we should be able to run it and to test it now. Okay, so if we run it, let's go to the main class. Okay, so if now I click on this, okay, let's click around. So we can test the backend separately. Once we can see that the front end is running successfully, the backend is running successfully fine, we will then begin to move to creation of the front end, and then we can test the end-to-end. Okay, so let's look at the logs or the build logs. Seems to be starting up successfully. Okay, as you can see, Tomcat started on port 88. So it's starting that up. So now what we need to do, now we can begin to go and test from this endpoint, okay, on that port as well. Okay, so again, you can use Postman, or you can use in your CLI or whichever tool you would like to use. But of course, in this case, I'm just going to quickly send out a simple curl command or a simple curl request to that endpoint. Okay, so let me just copy my curl. Okay, so this is the request that I'm sending. It goes to, again, it's a post, as I said, because of that method. It's actually a post method, not a get or a put. It's a post. So define that in, and then specify where the route is, which is localhost port 8080, goes to the endpoint, which is the payments, and the create function or the create method. And we specify the content type, which is the JSON data, and then we specify -d, which is the data. So amount of 5,000, currency USD, payment method, it's CAD. So what I'm expecting in this case, it should initiate the transfer, but not to fully satisfy it, or again, not to process it fully. So because of we require now a payment method. Okay, but let's send it and see what we'll be getting in this case. Okay. Okay, good. As I said, it initiated the payment, but again, it just requires now the status, which is the requires payment method. So because of the backend, you cannot see that payment method when you are sending to this, because it's expecting it from the front end based on the configuration. Okay, so again, if it's doing this now, it means its the backend is working successfully fine and it is ready to receive a real payment transaction from the front end. Then it can be able to process it accordingly. Okay, so folks, it means now the backend is working fine. So let's go ahead now and create the front end service, and then we can connect the two systems. Okay, so from what we have here, now we can go to the front end. Okay, so from the front end, okay, to create a new project using okay, let me just do it clear here. So we can create a new project using npx. As I said, you need to install what? npm first before, so Node.js, so you can be able to create a Node project that will be using React. Okay, so for folks, this is the command that you can use to create this Node project or this React based front-end service. So we use the command, which is npx create app. Of course, once you've entered it, which is something that I've already done, and we're just going to show you how you can edit. So okay, let's do enter. We create a catalog payment. Of course, this command takes a while, so to wait for it, of course, it may take too much time. But as you can see, creating a new project, so now it's going to be installing all the React components, modules. Okay, so I'm just gonna, once that's done, of course, once that is all done and finished, what you can just do now, you need to install Ensures, which is the library that allows us to do HTTP request to the backend. So using that command, we do now npm install. Okay, so once the first command is done and finalized, you will need to run the second one, which is this one now. So that will also allow us to install the Stripe.js SDK for front end of our React. So which is using this command npm install at stripe / stripe-js at stripe react stripe.js and lastly ensures. So you need that command as well, or you need to run that command as well to install from that okay, first you probably need to cd to it. Maybe before running it, you will first, since let's say now at my case, okay, as you can see, my project has been created. Of course, you need to be inside it so you can be able to run that command. So you need to be inside it, and then from here you can then begin to run that command to automatically install those 3 libraries to your node or to your package.json file, so you can be able to call them and reference them from your front-end service. Okay, so again, once you do all of this, folks, now you need to export the project or import it to your IDE. Of course, in this case, I will be using Visual Studio Code. But now, before exporting it, maybe let me show you the flow first of how it will be, the flow for the front end. So this is the structure that you require for the front end, the very basic structure. So just so you are able to see this before starting or before opening your project from the front end layer. So now what we need here, so you have a folder called source API. Inside that you will have to create one file called the payment API.js. And then from creating that one, you have another folder called components, and which will also have one file called checkout.jsx. Lastly, you will have a pages, which is a folder as well, and inside that folder you will create a payment page.jsx, which is a React component. And again, you have the defaults then now, which is the app.js, index.js, and index.css. I know sometimes when you're creating the project from scratch, it gives you other files, so I believe you can delete those Again, from creation, it gives some basic dummy files that I believe you can delete those, but ensure that you have this structure, because this is the structure that you'll be using. Okay, but I'll show you from, of course, we'll be doing it together, so not really stress much on that one. Okay, so now once we have that in here, and then you've created a project from your terminal or whatever case you are, or your front end, now we can begin to start adding files on from the code side as well. So again, this is the structure that I'm expecting. So as I said, these ones, of course, these are the files that Node or React will be using for referencing on the for module referencing. So those ones are there by default. So again, don't delete them, ensure you keep them safe. So this is what you should be seeing currently, or this is the structure that I'm expecting that you should be having at your end. So now from source, exactly, this is also gonna be how your source looks like, because this is the only component or the only files and folders that you require for the source. So from the API, it's empty, which is something that we'll be creating now. Okay, so from this side, what we need now, we need to be creating now the files as well. So again, we can start from the env file as well. I prepared some snippets too for the front end as well. So you just copy your config, and then you come into your env.environment file. So what do you require here? We require what? The React stripe. So this time we are using the public key, not the secret key, because the secret key, it's only gonna be the backend, and the public key is for the front end now. So the front end requires, as you can see, public key test, so it requires the public key. So now again, the second parameter will require the base API URL, which is going to the backend service. So we add that in here as well, so which is the URL for the backend where the API is from. Okay, so then you add that in. Now you start from the API layer. Again, I'm just gonna copy my snippet. Okay, so you create a file called the payment API, paste it, or according to the structure, we create a file called payment, new file. We do a payment API.js. Also add that. I'll come in and add the snippet or the code for it. It's a very simple code. Okay, you add that in payment API. As you can see, it's just referencing the URL, the backend URL, but of course, as well, let's first add the code in, then we'll discuss it later. Okay, so from here now on the components layer, let's add a checkout.jsx. Again, you can confirm from your front-end structure. Again, components, we have the checkout form.jsx. Okay, components, close this. Components, you create a new file, checkout form.jsx. Add it in, and then you go copy your snippet, copy code snippet. Once you copy that, you come in and paste it. Of course, I'll be going through the code as well, so don't really stress much. And I will push this code to make it a backend and make it available for you guys, just in case you wanna look at the code or run it on yourselves. So we have that in, and then for pages, now we require the last page. Let's go to our snippet, which is the payment page. Okay, copy that. Okay, now let's create a new file into a basic payment page.jsx, and let's come in and add the code. Okay, it also contains some CSS, of which we'll be looking at. be a bit cleaner. Okay. Okay, so let's now add our files, which is our main files now. So again, I said to require what? app.js. Now let's create app.js. Okay, which is also needs to be inside source. Yes, add app.js. Let's come in and copy the snippet for that. Add the snippet, and secondly we create now index. Create index.js, and then we copy the index.js snippet, which should be the entry point of our application. Okay, we paste that, and then lastly we create now the styling, which is index.css. Okay, let's copy the styling as well. Paste this one in. Okay, so folks, now we can begin to look at all of these files. So the first file that we have the payment API. So the payment API, it's what initiates or connects to the backend, or it forwards all the requests to the backend service. This is what connects the front end to the backend. Okay, so as you can see, we are creating a constant variable, which is the API base, and then which reads from the env file, and then or automatically assigns that, which is already defaults that to that again. Again, it goes to the same place, which is something that we've already defined, we've already created. So it goes in there. Okay, just gonna close this node to modules. Okay, this, yes. So we just create that, just initiates the connection between the backend and the front end, and forwards the payload, the request payload. Okay, it's just the payment API. Now let's go to the component, which is the checkout page. So yeah, the checkout page, it's what allows us to be able to check out, or to be able, or it reads the card information, gets the card information, processes it, and sends it to the backend. So that's just what's been doing that work, which is the checkout form. So again, it's quite long for me to go through all of that, but it's straightforward because it creates a constant variable stripe. It uses stripe, and it uses elements, and then which is it inputs the client secret and the amount, which is of course the amount that will be passing from the front end on when you are checking out. Then it goes in and assigns that in, and set a loading through, and then gets the element, cut the information, what it gets that. Again, if it does it returns an error message depending on the state, of course. And then of course, if the payment intent is of course succeeded, it returns a payment message, which is the payment successful, or else if not, it returns a payment status based on the payment intent status code or status message. So which is in this case, you are expecting a failure, then if it returns the failing message of what's causing the failure, or what's causing it to fail. And then from that, just returns that, which is the submit button. Okay, so that's just the checkout form. Now from the checkout form, we go to pages, which is the payment page, which is now this part that initiates the payment directly. Okay, so now again, we are using state, we get to the payment, again allows the user to enter a payment, reads the card. If it's a custom card or it's a custom payment, it reads that. Again, checks based on the card, and then it does a styling. So basically this is more on a styling level now. Okay, and then that's all. So on the app.js, of course, this one, it's what calls the payment page. So it's like a, on browser, it just opens the payment page. So, and this all, it gets invoked. So meaning the entry point now, it's calling the app.js that renders that payment page. Okay, and then the index.css is basically just a styling of that payment page, or the whole home page, you may call it. Okay, so once you have all of that in, we should be able to run this project now. So if again I come to my front end, I come to my come to my terminal. Okay, so again using npm start, you can start this project. So if I do npm start, again ensure that you are on the right directory, you are inside your project. So once you edit that, you can do now npm start, which should start out the front end layer. Again, this will probably take some time, but that's React. So but it will start eventually. So once you add all of that in, okay, so what we have now, so in the meantime, when it's starting up, let's verify if the backend is still running. Yes, the backend is still running. Okay, so again, ensure that the backend is running, because if the front end is dependent on the backend. So ensure the backend is always running before running the front end. Okay, let's just double check. Okay, so starting up again. It should take us to the browser, but of course it probably will automatically open up a browser. So again, once we have all of that in and we've made, but let's first give it some time while it is starting up, because I know we probably also need, maybe we can kind of open Postman in the meantime while it is still starting up. So if I do Postman, well, we don't necessarily need it since we already tested it from the terminal side, the backend that is running fine. So again, we just need to give it some time, the front end, while it's still loading up, because I know sometimes it takes a bit of a while to load it. Okay, so while it is loading, how we can see when we've made a transaction. So again, something that we'll be looking at on how we can see when transaction have been succeeded and when they've been failed. So for now, while it's still starting up, I'll show you from my previous transaction that I've made that have succeeded and the ones that have failed. Then we can, so that we can also grant some time the front end layer to start as well. So again, if we go into your Stripe dashboard, this is now, we're not the API key side. So again, if you, when here, you just simply click on transaction. So transaction will give you a list of detailed transaction history, whether they've been failed or they've succeeded or they are still pending. So it will give you a list of those. Then you can be able to verify if your whole end-to-end flow is successfully working or not. So again, following some tested cases that I've made to some testing scenarios, so this is how a succeeded one is. So it even tells this payment is complete. And if a payment is incomplete, this is what it tells you: the customer has not entered their payment method. That's why it is incomplete. So again, hence the front end layer or the backend layer was complaining for that, because of, maybe we can also do because of that, you know. For example, check this one. Okay, so for the timestamp, I'm not mentioning much. But anyway, this is how we should be seeing whether a transaction has succeeded or it has failed. But we'll be sending a one from the front end now. Okay. Still starting up. Okay. Let's give it some time. I know I add some time. It does take a bit of a while. So just need to allow it so it can start successful. Okay. So again, as I said, this is how you should be seeing your transaction, whether they have completed successfully or they have failed. So with this structure, once the front-end layer starts, and to finalize, it's a start. Okay, as you can see now, it's loading. Now it will be starting up. So we can just give it a bit of some time, some seconds, while it is initiating and start up. Okay. So again, this repo, it's gonna be starting at port 3000. But of course, normally it automatically starts it up on startup, so we shouldn't stress much about that one. As you can see now, it's loading, it's finalizing to load. Okay, so once it is loaded, maybe for now I can also start to finalize our presentation or our slides. Okay. So again, as I said, this is our front-end structure, and let's look at the production best practices now. So again, it's important when you are taking this repo to production, you might, okay, there it's automatically start up. Okay, I guess we'll finalize our demo slides after doing this end-to-end flow, testing flow. As you can see now, the front end is automatically started. So yes, this is what we should be getting, which is starting the development server. Okay, so you just need to allow it some bit of some time while it's finalizing that. Okay, again, as I said, always confirm if the backend is running, because if the backend is not running, the front end will fail as it sends all the requests to the backend. Okay, so just take note or ensure. Okay, it's probably doing a build and a test. That's React, which is normal in React systems. Okay, but of course, once it finalizes that, it will automatically start out fine. Okay. Okay, just probably finalizing the build stage. Okay, perhaps while it is finalizing it, as I said, maybe you can finalize our demo slides. So as I said as well, as I was saying, it's important to use environment variables to maintain your keys, your API keys, your access keys, public and private. It's important to use environment variables instead of storing them directly to the project or to the repository. And also enable webhook signature for validation. Store transaction in a database, which is also very important. If you would like to, for tracking purposes, it's important to store each transaction, whether it is failed or it is succeeded. You need to store it in a database so you can easily be able to revert it or roll back when you need to, or trace it for that matter. Okay, and also use API keys per environment, which is also very important to use API keys per environment, which is for test, dev, production. You can use the same keys across all environments. It's important for each environment to use environment specific keys. And lastly, it's important to rotate the keys and enforce rules so that each time a key doesn't last too long, you rotate it gradually so you can keep the security enforced on that one. Okay, so let's validate it now. Okay, so again, seems like it's still starting the development server. So we can all, okay, there we go, it should have successfully compiled now. So let's verify on the front end. As you can see, folks, now this is our little UI, our little React UI that we are getting for test. So again, in this case, we've looked at different amount. So now I will make a new amount that is not there, so you can see the difference, you know. Okay, let's make $150. Now, you know, $150 is not there yet. I haven't purchased anything on in 150 amount. So I will make it as a $150. So now if I do type 150, as you can see, it's a USD. So now we'll do a P now. So it means now this will automatically triggers a payment intent that goes and be signed on the backend. So once that is signed, the SpringBoot Stripe SDK will validate that payment intent and create and initiate a proper payment. Okay, so now let's do a pay now. As you can see, preparing payment. So now it has created or initiated a payment intent that is waiting for the card number information. Okay, so let's copy some dummy card number details that I have here. So we have okay, the card number. Let's take this card number. I know this one always works. So let's take this card number now. Imagine a user types now a card number on your system. They are making a payment, of course. They've selected all the items they want to buy, and then now they are checking them out. So again, they come to this page. As you can see, automatically it validates the card number. It validates based on the card number and decided, okay, this is a Visa card, of which it is true. This is a proper Visa card number, even if it was like a Maestro or any other card systems or any other card systems. So okay, so what we have now, we need to provide a month. It's also 12, 34, which is the 12. It's the month, and it's the year, and the CVC is a 1, 2, 3, and the zip code 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now we are initiating a payment fee of $150. Let's press pay now. Processing. As you can see, it means now the payment has been successful. So as you can see, now we're getting a payment successful, which is a good. So now we can confirm, how we can confirm that this payment was success or failed. So again, there are so many ways we can do that, but which is the recommended way? I always trust it's just to go to a Stripe dashboard, which should see a transaction of a 150 now. Succeeded. Okay, if I do a refresh, let me just do a refresh. Okay, let's just do a refresh. Wait for the transactions to load. Payment, because now that we've seen it on the site, on the system side, on the application side, that the payment is successful. So now let's confirm it. So let's close this. Okay, so what we have, there it is. As you can see, payment is complete, $150. Yes, the only problem here that I'm seeing, it's probably the timestamp. It doesn't seem to be matching mine, so maybe that could create instead of that creating confusion to you guys. Just know that that timestamp, of course, we are on a different time zone, so it might probably be on a different timestamp from the Stripe side. Okay. But of course, this is the new transaction that we just made. As you can see, it is the first one, and these ones that we have seen now, it's the time we're testing from the API side, because of, as you can see, we had that error message or that response that says requires payment method. which is this stage. It has created a payment intent, but it requires now a card information so it can finalize the payment transaction, which it never received, hence it throws you that status. But in this case, as you can see now that we have made a full flow and we've provided all the checkout details, the visa info, all the payment information details, and we've made proper payment. So now the payment status is success, which is this case, and we can verify that that payment was successful because of even the status, and also we can see the amount in real time. So folks, I think I will be ending here. If you have any questions, you need anything, you can reach out or share those in the comment section. I will be answering those. And lastly, I will also try to get this this repo in my GitHub account, and then you can be able to view it on your end. Probably want to run it, but of course you might have to create or generate a new keys, because I will be disabling the ones that I'm using currently. Okay, so folks, as you can see, you saw how you have made our payment. Now we can finalize our slides again. So I've already covered this part, which is for production best practices. Okay, so now again, next steps, I believe next steps, what you can just do, perhaps add a proper nice UI, add a successful page instead of like just returning a successful message here. You might want to add a redirect page that goes to a successful page when the payment is success, or you can still leave it here. But of course, that is just next steps that you can take if you want to make the system production grade, you know. Okay, but the flow will still be the same. Okay, so from here again, you can add Postgres for data persistence, as I've explained. If you need to retrack your transaction history, it's important that you might want to persist each transaction when it enters through your system. And lastly, you can deploy this system on AWS, Dockerize it, deploy it to AWS EKS, ECS, Elastic Beanstalk, whatever case it may be, depending on your scenario. Okay, and final system overview. We looked at fully functioning payment backend, secure Stripe integration, customizable frontend checkout, dashboard verification, which is the Stripe dashboard that we use to verify our transactions, and production ready foundation. Okay, thank you so much, folks. I think I'll be ending here. If you have any comments, any questions, please drop them in the comment section. I will be answering those. And also, please, if you like this video, subscribe to my channel and like it. See you next time, folks. Cheers.